A single flash, a light so bright it turned night to day, not just over Hiroshima, but over the very fabric of human history. On the 16th of July, 1945, deep in the deserts of New Mexico, the earth trembled with a force it had never felt before. What had begun in quiet university labs and secret desert compounds had culminated in a new kind of fire, a fire forged not by gods, but by men. And with it came the beginning of the atomic age. But this moment, this detonation, wasn't merely a technological triumph. It was a crossroads, one that would split the world into before and after, into light and shadow, into science and silence. How did a desperate wartime gamble evolve into a power that could destroy civilizations? And what unseen hands shaped the choices that led from theory to annihilation? This is the story of the Manhattan Project, and the morning humanity became capable of its own extinction. In 1942, as Nazi tanks rolled across Europe and imperial forces occupied much of East Asia, another war was unfolding far from the front lines, a war of ideas, blueprints, and pure mathematics. On the surface, the United States remained focused on conventional warfare. But in the remote corners of Tennessee, Washington, and New Mexico, a shadow campaign was taking shape. Its goal, to create a bomb unlike any other. The Manhattan Project was not just a scientific undertaking, it was a political and logistical behemoth. Overseen by the Army Corps of Engineers, under the command of Major General Leslie Groves, and driven by the scientific genius of physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer, the project consumed resources at a staggering rate. Over 130,000 people were involved: engineers, physicists, chemists, machinists, security personnel, many of whom had no idea what they were truly building. The budget, $2 billion, equivalent to over $30 billion today. The stakes, the future of the world. At its heart was Los Alamos, a secret laboratory in the deserts of New Mexico. Chosen for its isolation and proximity to Oppenheimer's own familiarity with the landscape, it became a crucible of intellect, secrecy, and pressure. The site had once been a boys' school. Now it housed some of the greatest minds of the 20th century. Enrico Fermi, Niels Bohr, Richard Feynman, Edward Teller, John von Neumann. They called themselves luminaries, but many later admitted they were walking in the dark. Initially, the Los Alamos team focused on a plutonium gun-type weapon dubbed Thin Man. But by 1944, it became clear that plutonium's tendency to undergo spontaneous fission would cause the bomb to prematurely detonate, potentially even inside the bomber itself. The margin for error was zero. Oppenheimer, known for his brilliance and growing reputation as a moral philosopher, pivoted. He reorganized the lab. Under his leadership, and with the insights of von Neumann and others, the team began work on two radically different designs. Little Boy, a uranium-235 gun-type weapon. Fat Man, a plutonium-239 implosion design far more complex and untested. But theories weren't enough. Before a weapon of such magnitude could be unleashed, it had to be tested. There were doubts. Rumors circulated among the physicists. What if the explosion ignited the atmosphere? What if the fireball consumed the world? Calculations by Fermi and Bethe showed this was unlikely. But unlikely is not the same as impossible. Still, the test went forward. The 16th of July, 1945, 5:29 a.m. A name chosen by Oppenheimer himself, Trinity. In the vast emptiness of the New Mexico desert, a steel tower held aloft a spherical bomb, the first of its kind. The scientists and officers present wore dark goggles. They were told to lie face down. Some brought sunscreen. Others, like Fermi, turned the moment into an experiment, dropping bits of paper to calculate shockwave velocity. When the blast came, it was not a sound, it was an event. The flash lit the sky brighter than the sun. A mushroom cloud rose into the heavens. The desert floor turned to glass. Witness later described awe, terror, exhilaration. Some wept, some laughed. Oppenheimer did neither. Instead, he recalled a line from the Bhagavad Gita, the sacred Hindu scripture he had studied in Sanskrit. Now I am become death. the destroyer of worlds. This was not rhetoric, it was prophecy. Back in Europe, President Harry Truman had just arrived at the Potsdam Conference. When news of Trinity arrived via coded message, it changed everything. The successful test emboldened Truman in his dealings with Joseph Stalin, but unknown to Truman, Stalin was already aware Soviet spies had penetrated the Manhattan Project. Stalin merely nodded at the news and offered a cold, "I hope you make good use of it." The message was clear. The atomic era had begun, and it would not be unipolar for long. At this pivotal moment in history, a handful of men held the power to end the war or reshape civilization itself. The success of the Trinity test had confirmed what was once unthinkable. The atom could be split, its energy harnessed, its fury weaponized. But with this knowledge came a question that tore through both political and moral landscapes. Should it be used? By the summer of 1945, the war in Europe had ended. Nazi Germany had capitulated. But in the Pacific, Japan remained defiant. Fierce resistance on islands like Iwo Jima and Okinawa had revealed the grim reality of Japanese military doctrine, a willingness to fight to the last man, to the last breath. American military leaders feared that an invasion of the Japanese home islands would result in millions of casualties, both Allied and Japanese. And so the debate shifted. Was the bomb a necessary evil or a diplomatic weapon? On the 26th of July, 1945, the United States, Britain, and China issued the Potsdam Declaration. Its message to Japan was stark: surrender unconditionally or face prompt and utter destruction. Nowhere in the document was the atomic bomb mentioned, but its shadow loomed large. Leaflets were dropped across Japan. Foreign radio broadcasts repeated the ultimatum. Inside the Japanese government, chaos reigned. Some ministers wanted to negotiate surrender through the Soviet Union, still, at that point, officially neutral. Others clung to hope that Japan could hold out for better terms. The Emperor, Hirohito, quietly expressed openness to surrender, but his generals remained committed to the illusion of honor through annihilation. To the Americans, Japan's silence, what Prime Minister Suzuki called mokusatsu, was interpreted as rejection. The decision was made. The bomb would be dropped, the 6th of August, 1945, Tinian Island. A silver B-29 superfortress named the Enola Gay prepared for takeoff. On board, the Little Boy, a uranium bomb containing 64 kilograms of uranium-235. It had never been tested. The crew had been briefed, but only 3 knew its true power. At 8:15 a.m., Enola Gay released its payload over the city of Hiroshima, a bustling hub of military logistics and civilian life. The bomb detonated at an altitude of 580 meters, unleashing an energy equivalent to 15,000 tons of TNT. In an instant, the world changed. The fireball incinerated the city center. Temperatures at the epicenter reached over 1 million degrees Celsius. Buildings vaporized. Human shadows burned into stone. Within seconds, over 70,000 people were dead. Within months, twice that number would perish from burns, radiation, and injury. Eyewitnesses reported a flash of light, followed by silence and then a wave of fire. Survivors stumbled through the wreckage, their skin peeling from their bodies. The Shima Surgical Clinic, near the intended target, was obliterated. Even Japanese command couldn't immediately understand what had happened. Hiroshima had gone silent. Telephones were dead. Telegraphs cut. A reconnaissance plane was dispatched. As it approached the city, smoke stretched into the stratosphere. Nothing remained. Back in Washington, President Truman issued a statement: "We may be grateful to Providence that the German atomic bomb project had failed. If they do not now accept our terms, they may expect a rain of ruin from the air, the like of which has never been seen on this earth." But Japan did not surrender. Admiral Toyoda, chief of the Japanese Naval General Staff, speculated that the U.S. might have 1 or 2 more bombs at most. His advice: endure. Survive the next strike. Force better terms. This assessment was intercepted by American codebreakers, and once again, a decision was made. The 9th of August, 1945. A second bomb, Fat Man, was prepared. It was a plutonium implosion device, more complex than Little Boy, but tested during the Trinity explosion. Originally targeted for Kokura, the mission was diverted due to cloud cover. The secondary target, Nagasaki. Nagasaki was a major port and industrial city home to Mitsubishi arms factories, shipyards, and workers' housing. At 11:02 a.m., Fat Man detonated above the Urakami Valley. Though the terrain reduced the blast's destructiveness, over 40,000 people died instantly. Thousands more followed. The Japanese government was paralyzed. Civilian ministers urged surrender. Military leaders insisted on fighting to the bitter end. A failed coup was even attempted to prevent surrender. Finally, Emperor Hirohito intervened. In a radio address, the first time the Japanese people ever heard his voice, he said, "We have resolved to endure the unendurable and suffer what is insufferable. The enemy has begun to employ a new and most cruel bomb." The war was over, but the age it birthed had only just begun. The war ended, but the world had changed forever. What emerged from the ashes of Hiroshima and Nagasaki was not merely a military victory, but a moral reckoning. The atomic bomb was not just a weapon, it was a turning point in the human story. For the first time, civilization had created the means of its own obliteration, not in centuries, not in decades, but in seconds. The immediate consequences were devastating. Over 200,000 people in Hiroshima and Nagasaki lost their lives by the end of 1945. Tens of thousands more would suffer the long-term effects of radiation, leukemia, birth defects, cancers, and deep psychological scars. Cities were flattened, families erased. Survivors, or hibakusha, were shunned, both feared and pitied. Their suffering became a symbol not of triumph, but of warning. And yet, even in ruin, life persisted. Children were born. Schools rebuilt. Shadows cast by the flash of fission slowly faded, but the fear remained. As Japan signed its surrender aboard the USS Missouri in September 1945, leaders across the globe understood. A new kind of power had entered the equation. And with it, a new kind of war, one of deterrence, secrecy, and mutually assured destruction. The Soviet Union, long aware of the Manhattan Project through its espionage network, wasted no time. Just 4 years later, in 1949, they detonated their own atomic bomb. The arms race had begun. By the 1950s, the world was divided not by trenches and tanks, but by missile ranges and fallout projections. The Cold War, though never officially declared, was waged in silence with thousands of warheads pointed at cities across the globe, Cuban Missile Crises, proxy wars, fallout shelters, civil defense drills. Fear became a constant companion to modern life. The Manhattan Project had succeeded beyond its wildest calculations, and in doing so, raised a specter that could never be exorcised. From Los Alamos to Chernobyl, from Trinity to 3 Mile Island, the atom had escaped the lab. In the decades that followed, the men of the Manhattan Project were hailed as heroes, mourned as villains, and remembered as both. Few exemplify this duality more than J. Robert Oppenheimer. A brilliant physicist, a lover of poetry, and a man haunted by what he had helped create, Oppenheimer would go on to warn of the very weapon he had fathered. He opposed the development of the hydrogen bomb, testified about the dangers of arms escalation, and was eventually stripped of his security clearance during the Red Scare. To some, he had become untrustworthy. To others, he had finally become wise. In a meeting with President Truman shortly after Hiroshima, Oppenheimer confessed, "Mr. President, I feel I have blood on my hands." Truman, reportedly furious, told aides he never wanted to see that crybaby scientist again. That one line, spoken behind closed doors, encapsulates the moral tension at the heart of the atomic age. Who bears responsibility when the tool of destruction is built by the mind, but wielded by the state? Was the bomb necessary? Did it save lives by ending the war quickly? Or was it a demonstration, a geopolitical message aimed not only at Japan, but at the Soviet Union? Historians still debate these questions, and perhaps they always will. Because unlike past conflicts, World War II didn't just end with victory. It ended with a threshold one we've never truly stepped back from. Today, the legacy of the Manhattan Project lives on in policy rooms, in nuclear bunkers, in the silent orbit of warheads circling the Earth. The total global nuclear arsenal, while reduced from Cold War peaks, still numbers in the thousands. And in every summit, every treaty, every standoff, the shadow of 1,945 looms. We are, as Oppenheimer feared, destroyers of worlds. And yet, this destructive potential may have also served as a paradoxical guardian. The threat of nuclear annihilation, for all its terror, arguably prevented direct conflict between major powers for decades. But is that peace or paralysis? Are we living in safety or simply in suspense? In the years that followed Hiroshima and Nagasaki, monuments were built, memorials erected, wounds studied, regrets voiced and then forgotten. But one truth remains. The Manhattan Project did not end in 1945. It continues. Not as a physical program, but as a philosophical dilemma buried within modern civilization. To this day, the world's most powerful nations stake their sovereignty, their deterrence, their very existence on weapons. No one dares to use tools so devastating that their only utility lies in never being activated. In essence, the globe is kept in balance, not by trust or diplomacy, but by a shared, unspoken acknowledgement of mutual destruction. This is the doctrine of mad, mutually assured destruction, a paradox as chilling as it is effective. And beneath this fragile equation lies the ghost of Trinity, the silent ash of Hiroshima, the firestorms of Nagasaki, and the anguished echo of Oppenheimer's whispered scripture. Now I am become death. The world did not explode in 1945, but it did transform. Borders were redrawn,
and beneath this fragile
alliances
equation
reshaped,
lies the ghost of
the
Trinity,
very rules
the
of
silent
war
ash of Hiroshima,
rewritten in
the
radiation,
firestorms of Nagasaki,
and the
and the
scientists,
anguished echo
the
of
generals,
Oppenheimer's
the
whispered
leaders,
scripture.
they passed the flame to
Now
the
I
next
am become
generation.
death.
Today,
The world did not explode
nuclear
in
weapons sit
1945,
in
but it
underground
did
silos,
transform.
in
Borders
stealth
were
submarines
redrawn,
beneath the
alliances
seas,
reshaped,
in
the
aircraft
very
ready for
rules of
launch
war
at a
rewritten in
moment's
radiation.
notice. And
And
each
the
remains,
scientists, the
as
generals,
they were
the
in
leaders, they
1945,
passed the flame to the next
fingers on a
generation.
trigger,
Today,
the price of
nuclear
power,
weapons
the
sit in underground
inheritance of
silos,
fear.
in stealth
So we are
submarines
left
beneath
with
the
a
seas,
question.
in aircraft
Did
ready
the
for launch
atomic
at a
bomb
moment's
end the
notice.
war, or
And
begin
each
a
remains
countdown
as they
we've
were
yet
in
to stop?
1945.
This is the
Fingers on a
legacy
trigger,
of the
the
Manhattan
price of power,
Project.
the inheritance of
Not
fear.
just the
So
invention
we are
of a
left with a
weapon,
question.
but the
Did the
creation of a
atomic bomb
new
end the
world
war, or
suspended
begin a
in
countdown
permanent
we've yet to
tension.
stop?
A world
This
that
is the
must
legacy
never
of the
again
Manhattan
forget what
Project.
one flash over
Not
the
just the
desert
invention of a
proved,
weapon, but the
that our
creation of a new
greatest
world,
triumphs in science
suspended
may
in
also
permanent
be our
tension.
most dangerous.
A world that must
If
never
this
again forget
documentary
what one
moved
flash
you
over
or
the desert
gave you
proved,
new insight
that our
into the
greatest
birth of
triumphs
the
in
atomic
science may
age,
also be our most
consider
dangerous.
subscribing
If
to
this
Legacy
documentary
Files.
moved you or gave you
We
new
bring to
insight
life
into
the
the birth of
untold
the atomic
moments of
age,
history,
consider
those that
subscribing
still
to
shape
Legacy
our
Files.
world in
We
silence.
bring to life the
Share your
untold
thoughts
moments of
below.
history,
Was
those
the
that still
Manhattan
shape our
Project
world in silence.
justified?
Share
Or
your
did it
thoughts
unlock
below.
a power no
Was the Manhattan Project
civilization should ever
justified?
wield?
Or did it unlock a power no civilization should ever wield?